Okay. So last week, we suggested that the parent-child relationship is the most complex of all human relationships. There are those who would disagree. We'll leave it at that. Our sages, ancient and contemporary, have acknowledged the wonder of marriage, yes, but also the challenge that marriage can be. Two quotes. First, from Masechet Sotah in the Talmud, which says, and I'm sure you're familiar with this, to effect the union between husband and wife is as difficult as the splitting of the Reed Sea. So you can all take a moment to agree, disagree. And then Rav Soloveitchik, who I have been quoting recently, says the following: marriage is the miraculous transition from the I-it contact to the I-thou relationship. So why is marriage so difficult to maintain? Why is this union considered miraculous? Well, marriage unites individuals with different personalities, different temperaments. It unites independent individuals, each with his or her own mode of reacting and experiencing life and evaluating the world, and individuals with variant sexual and emotional needs. Anybody want to add to that list of what makes it difficult? Promising your spouse that it doesn't necessarily mean you're talking about you? I see a variety of people, some who have found marriage to be a big challenge, some who just celebrated an anniversary yesterday. I don't want to pick on Merle and Steve. Anybody else who celebrated yesterday? June is a good month for anniversaries, so don't be shy. Anyone want to add to that list? Another reason why marriage might be a challenge, difficult? No? Yes, Gloria. Unmute yourself, Gloria. Guys, please remember to unmute yourselves.
COVID.
Gloria. How about?
What about values? What about job history? What about genetics?
Those make for differences. Absolutely. What do you
Cultural
mean?
gaps.
Say that again?
Cultural gaps. Coming from different cultures.
Yes. Anybody else? Absolutely. You come from different backgrounds, and even if you're in love, those backgrounds can call for adjustments that can be very difficult.
Parents of the parents of the couple.
Did Bobby's parents give you problems, Marilyn?
No, they didn't give me problems. But I've heard of people who've had the marriage has been called off because of the parents' pressure.
Yes, but that says something about the couple, or at least one of them, if they allowed that to happen. Anyone else?
Bracha. So what about
please.
What about two people who grow in different directions, who change their interests, etc.? I think ill health can be a challenge. I think crisis within families can be challenges.
all three of what you just said, absolutely. Now, sometimes you think that if two get married very, very young, then that is an opening to there being changes later on in life because they're so young. But there are couples that go different ways as they get older. They become, whether it's more religious, whether it's they more become into meditation, all kinds of examples. And there has to be a way of there being something there that will bind them nonetheless. And there are couples like that who do go different ways,
Bracha,
but there's something there that they decide to stay together because of that love. Marlene.
I think in our generation, the whole idea of women's liberation and feminism has really put a lot of pressure on marriages because roles have changed.
Absolutely, absolutely. Anyone else?
Can you hear me now?
Gloria, yes.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Well, all I wanted to say is that there is a period of adjustment, and couples have to realize that it's not an overnight change, and it takes time. And if you haven't got time or the patience, it doesn't work.
Absolutely. Yes, Stephen.
Peer pressure from friends, from society, from children, and another very big one, politics, different political viewpoints.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, we could spend hours in talking about any of these differences, and perhaps at another time. Anyone else before we proceed? Okay. So our Talmudic sources offer visions of marriage while realistically portraying the many challenges of sustaining this union. Now, I feel the need to preface this before we look at our two narratives today. If one looks at the halakha, the legal framework, to understand the rabbinic attitudes toward the role of women in marriage, you won't be getting the full picture. One must look at the Aggadic narratives to see that our sages, Chazal, were not merely concerned with reproduction of children or husbands' rights. We see that, but that's not the only perspective. In fact, I want to submit they are concerned with marital relationships being based on respect and communication and not hierarchy. I'm going to share so the only couple that I am seeing right now, but I'm not sure, is Norm and Simone. So I'm going to put you on the spot, Norman, and I'm going to ask Simone. Simone, could you unmute yourself and read this sentence before you?
I appreciate you for not bothering me when I wanted to read quietly last night.
Thank you. Norm, be honest. How do you feel having heard your wife, your dear, your beloved wife, Simone, say that to you? Picture you're in your bedroom, you're busy with Merkaz, whatever but Simone is reading. And she says that to you. I appreciate you for not bothering me when I wanted to read quietly last night. How do you react to her making that statement?
depending what the subject is.
What do you mean?
Well, there are some subjects more important, from my perspective, that I want to discuss with her. Other things I can appreciate. She's reading, I won't bother her.
Okay. Anybody else? Thank you. Stearns, may you have many more opportunities to read together and talk
Amen.
together. Anybody else want to try to suggest why I am looking at this sentence as perhaps not the ideal way to tell your spouse something? Or should I put it this way? Is there a better way to put that sentence? And I'll tell you why. We've been told by psychologists that our unconscious does not recognize a negative. So when Simone says, I appreciate you for not bothering me, if Norm was just any kind of guy, he would let stay in him rather than valuing Simone's time, and he would have only remembered her using the word bothering. And that's what would have stuck with her.
Yeah, there's a tone of criticism in the statement.
Absolutely. Instead of hearing the not bothering, he's going to, gee, am I usually annoying to Simone? And perhaps this is the better way to express that. I appreciate you for respecting my wish to read quietly last night. Now, this might seem very simplistic, but I'm willing to bet there are those of you who have even read books about communicating. Her plan, beware, that's why this is complicated. When the wife said the thank you, the initial thank you, she was doing it to be nice. But the way she expressed it, her plan backfired on her. So, this issue of communication was real now, and it was real back in the time of the Talmud. So let's look at our first narrative. A certain man from Babylonia went up to the land of Israel, and he married a woman there. He said to her, "Cook me 2 lentils." She cooked him 2 lentils. He seethed with anger at her. The next day, he said to her, "Cook me a griva, a very large measure of lentils," which in our day would be a ton of lentils. She cooked him a griva. He said to her the third day, "Go and bring me 2 botzonai." Now, botzonai has 2 meanings: pumpkins or lamps. So in fact, she brought him 2 lamps. He said to her, "Go and break them on the head of the gate." And the word for gate is bava. Rabbi Rava ben Buta was sitting at the gate, the bava, and judging cases. She went and broke them on his head. Now, in those days, lamps were made out of clay, so no damage was incurred. He said to her, "What is this thing that you have done?" She said to him, "Thus my husband commanded me." He said to her, "You did your husband's will. May God bring forth from your belly 2 sons like Bava ben Buta. Now, what do we have here in this narrative? Anyone? Because I'm going to suggest there are 3 possible readings, but let's, without analyzing each line, just at a first glance, what do we have here? Without thinking too much, how does it strike you? I don't know if Helen is here, but remembering what she felt last week, I'd be willing to suggest what she would say. So anybody else, how do you feel about this? What kind of a marriage do we have here? Please.
She seems to be very obedient to him, and him very commanding. I don't think I'd be comfortable with that.
Okay.
But I think there's a feeling of goodwill on her part, that she wants to please him, and she wants to do what he's asking of her, and I feel as if she has goodwill towards him. But I wonder, I don't know. Yeah, that's all.
I'd like to say something. I think that their level of communication is not the same. She is very specific as to what she is hearing, and he, like when the amount of lentils, he said 2, so she, well, whatever it meant, a couple, and she made 2. And that's not what he meant, because he became very angry. So they are not really communicating quite at the same level. That's just one of the issues. But obviously very obedient.
Okay.
Well, it shows to me a lack of common sense. Nobody says bring 2 lentils and means 2 lentils. It's not using her seichel. Okay, to me, nobody, you wouldn't find 100 people that would bring just 2 lentil beans.
But he also expects her to be able to read his mind.
In the lamp on the rabbi's head, nobody's going to do like that without saying.
Okay, Stephen, I think you're having a problem with your sound. Thank you.
Oh, okay.
Okay, anybody else? So.
Yeah, I can't help myself, Bracha. It's Sigal.
Go ahead.
I'm just gonna.
Just remember, Matthew is probably close by.
Yeah, true that. I'm gonna echo Helen's sentiment from last time and say I found the entire exchange infuriating.
Good.
Why can't he get his own lentils? And if he sees that there's miscommunication, why can't he understand who he's married to and speak her language a little bit better? That's part of a marriage. We don't all communicate the same way, but part of being in a healthy relationship is understanding the needs of your partner and coming towards them so you can meet in the middle.
Thank you, Sigal.
Absolutely. Where were you a long time ago? Okay, now, yes, the first reading would be looking at this as a narrative of marital oppression. The wife perhaps is a punching bag. Now notice I said perhaps. And Ben Buta, in this reading, we're a little suspicious of him. He was sitting there at the gate as a judge, and people would come to him. And he actually had a reputation for being very sensitive and listening very carefully. But we're disappointed in the fact that he doesn't pick up from what she's told him, that he's more concerned because he sends her home. He's obviously not feeling it's his place to give her shelter, because if it is a reading of marital oppression, but instead he's more concerned perhaps with her husband's honor. That is one possibility. On the other hand, let's keep in mind that he doesn't get upset with her either, because he just broke 2 lamps on his head. Okay. Now, I think it was Bev who said that she seems very obedient. Is it possible to look at this in a bit of a different way? She's actually being highly assertive. She's refusing to conduct her life according to his extreme dictates. She's waging a war of self-liberation. If you don't mean just two, then don't say just two. And if you don't want a griva, don't say a griva. Talk to me. Talk to me. Now, we said at the beginning, and now we're going to look at it closely to let a third reading evolve. Let's keep in mind that he comes from Babylonia, comes to the land of Israel, and it is conceivable that their vocabularies are different. He's speaking a Babylonian Aramaic, and she that of Israel. Or if the words aren't really different, then at least the dialect is. So it's a linguistic mismatch, which could be very symbolic of a much more profound gap in their own communication. Now, let's look closely. Somebody said, I think somebody alluded to, that she also maybe has an issue. I'm not sure, but I think so. Because clearly it appears that the husband, if we read it first and second way, is the problem. Because he doesn't speak very much. Is that what you do? Is that you come in to your home and you say to your wife, cook me 2 lentils? No conversation before, not really saying please. So he's very closed and isn't a big talker. Not only that, he gets very angry with her. The next day, he asks for more, but he gives a ridiculous amount that he suggests that she cook him. Now, I think it was Stephen that said, she's not using her seichel. Because what's happening here, and this can be an issue in communication, should she know what a decent or normal amount of lentils would be appropriate? So he doesn't get angry, though, the second day. But after that, he does something interesting. He takes a word, botzenai, which we said can either mean pumpkins or lamps. And he intentionally chooses that word because he wants to see which one of those is she going to choose. Now, getting back to Stephen, if she's using her seichel, if she's preparing another meal that in that context, you would assume that she would know that it was pumpkins. However, he was hoping she would do as she did. And she takes the 2 lamps. Now, before I continue, anybody want to take a wild guess why he used a word that not only meant pumpkins, a food item, but 2 lamps?
He was really setting her up. He was setting her up. He was setting her up for failure. If she brought the lamps, that was going to be wrong. If she brought the pumpkins, he was going to have a reason that that's not what he said as well. I think he's pretty mean.
I'm sorry?
I think he's pretty mean. He's very mean-spirited.
Right.
And if not mean,
Bracha?
sorry? Yes.
She doesn't seem to have the whatever it takes to say, well, which one do you mean? It doesn't say there that she asked.
Okay, Laura, that's
Yeah.
a point that's very important too. She doesn't make too much of an effort at this point, you might think, to understand what he's trying to say at. She's not forthright in saying at this point, say more to me, say more to me. It's as if she's also playing a game with him. Now, anybody else see anything a little differently regarding the two lamps? Two Shabbat lamps? I'm giving you a clue.
You know what I just thought of? She's so fed up with him that she was determined to smash those lamps out of frustration with her life with him.
Okay. Anybody know what Shabbat candlesticks represent other than bringing in the Holy Shabbat? They're a symbol of what?
Family, unit, marriage.
Oh, Helen, you are here.
Yeah, I've been here all along.
Okay, so you heard me say that I remember what you said. Shalom Bayit. Do you know if you have to make a choice between Hanukkah candles and Shabbat candles, you go with the Shabbat candles. Hopefully nobody should be in that financial situation where you have to make a choice, but it was always said that you would choose the Shabbat candles because there isn't anything more important than peace in the home. Shalom Bayit. And part of the candles is, especially in those days when they didn't have electricity, you would use the candles so that there would be light, so you'd be able to see where you're going. But also at the table, we know that part of eating isn't just the taste, but it's also seeing the beautiful layout and what you have in front of you on your dish. We have a hint of him choosing, because he could have chosen another word that meant two different items, but that he's perhaps thinking about Shalom Bayit. Somehow what's going on here is really getting to him, and maybe in her assertiveness and in her taking him literally, she's making him think. When she goes to the Sha'ar, which is called Bava, just like the rabbi, she still takes him literally. And even though she's going to embarrass herself in public, she breaks those candlesticks on the rabbi sitting there. Now, you might not buy this, but if her husband is already maybe, because some rabbis have interpreted this, that there's a crack of hope here, that he's seeing that there's a problem and it's got to change. And if he's thinking about Shalom Bayit, why does he still send her to the gate and tell her to shatter the lamps on the gate, break them? What could that possibly, none of this is factual, possibly be symbolic of? What is he really saying? If we want to take in this reading that he is beginning to see something, and we know that to fix something, you first have to see the problem. Why does he still insist on sending her to the gate to break? Why?
I'm just wondering if he's sort of asking for help. And
yes.
Perhaps because the rabbi is there, he thinks that's a good place to start.
Two things. Yes, Beth. The shattering is almost, some have suggested him saying to her, go to that gate and shatter the gate, because that's symbolic of shattering the gate to my locked heart. Shatter the gate as being a symbol of shattering, please, dear wife, my locked heart. Maybe. Now, why? Because she is not totally ridiculous. Why would she have still shattered those lamps on the rabbi? So his name is Rabbi. That doesn't mean that you shat them. What is she doing?
Radio.
Please?
Turn off radio. Hey, Google, turn off.
What might she be trying to show? She had place to grow as well. Has she left him because of this lack of communication? No. So what is she trying to say by doing such an embarrassing, extreme act as breaking lamps on this judge, on this rabbi's head? She, it's been suggested, is trying to show her willingness to go to an extreme on his behalf. Yes, no, but this narrative is one of many examples of the rabbis deciding to put a story in the Talmud that might make a man look bad, dictatorial, but their purpose in doing that is very similar to the Torah. That nobody there was perfect, and saying that we have to work at these challenges. Not only that the rabbis of the Talmud are willing to say changes have to be made in characters. This is not our ideal, that a husband should dictate to his wife in this way. And if we're giving you this narrative, we're allowing for that possibility. And the conclusion, the rabbi, Bava ben Buta, in the third reading, it's not that he's just sending her back for the honor of her husband, but he's really suggesting, as he sits there and allows her to smash those lamps, I'm being patient, as somebody suggested earlier. I am being patient, and I am listening, and I am talking with you, and he's meant to be a model for this couple. Perhaps. Anyone want to share anything before we move on to our next story?
Bracha.
Yes.
I mean, he says you did your husband's will. I mean, that is not a model of, I mean, what message is he giving her? And it doesn't sit right with me.
Okay, if you read it like that, but perhaps it would have been nice if there was opportunity for him to have said, you did your husband's will, and hopefully he'll do your will, because that is that each of you do each other's will. Okay. I can see how that would not sound particularly.
It's hard to put our values into that era and time.
This is true also.
And
okay?
that always through the Talmud, when I was studying Talmud, always through the Talmud, it was remembering that the values then are not our values and we can't superimpose them.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm also confused. I'm very confused because if the candlesticks symbolize Shalom Bayit and she destroys them, to me, she's destroying the Shalom Bayit. I mean, I don't understand.
Beautiful, Simone. Beautiful. I'm not meant to let you go out. That's the beauty, I say this so often, of reading a text with people. You don't read these texts by yourself. You read it in chavruta, because that other person is going to see something that you didn't see before. So that's wonderful. You're right. If it's a symbol of shalom bayit, why break them? Absolutely. Louise.
Well, this comes back to the comment about values. I know the difference in values, of course, then and now. However, if there are cracks in a marriage, I think that if a judge is wise, the judge would not think that it was a good time for them to have children. So that's, you know, that's what the judge wants. That was his closing remark. You'll have 2 sons. Now, I think the other thing is interesting, I don't know, significant, that there are 2 sons and not just 1.
That falls in line, actually, with what was destroyed, as Simone pointed out. The 2 lentils, the 2 lamps, the 2 sons. You should be blessed. Now, it says sons here, but in effect, it really is meant to mean children, because you know, once you've had 1 of each, you can say that's it. But I think what you just said, more importantly, about you don't suggest having children when you're having problems, that's certainly something of contemporary times. Wonderful, wonderful.
Bracha.
Yes.
There's only a problem that rabbis continue to give that advice to couples who are having problems, and saying that perhaps they should have children so that it will heal the marriage.
That still goes on today? Not wise. Not wise.
Bracha.
Helen.
You know, I've had this thing that whenever we used to have entertainment for couples, friends, kids getting married or whatever, I'd have people go around the room and give them advice. And my advice always was, and still is, that as you come together from 2 very different worlds, regardless of whether you're this, you know, you're the same and your backgrounds are the same or different, but you're still in different worlds when you come together. And you have to find a world that works together for both of you. And the important thing I always say is make sure you bring your partner along. And how do you do that? You do that with patience and understanding. And that's what's totally lacking here. He may have been genuine in the way he was viewing things. Let's give him the benefit of the doubt, although I don't think it's exactly right. He should have been patient. He should have said, that's not what I meant. This is what I meant. And next time, if you don't mind, let's do it this way.
Absolutely. That points to the profound problem they both had in communicating.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I also find it interesting that the blessing to her is that she has 2 sons like Bava Ben Buta, so that the judge is putting himself on that level and he's discarding the husband. I mean, that's kind of strange.
Interesting. Very interesting.
Okay.
Marlene?
Going along with what Simone said, I mean, I agree with her on the fact that breaking the lamps was symbolic of breaking Shalom Bayit. But perhaps the breaking of the lamps is even more significant because the wife has finally decided, look, this is not working the way it was. I've got to take some real action here and do something that's really going to draw the attention of my husband to the fact that I am not happy. And so the breaking of the lamps may be the first step in having Shalom Bayit back in the home.
I think that is a wonderful response to Simone. Do you agree, Simone? Sometimes you need to do something very extreme. I thought you were going to say she's taking something that would be considered almost sacrilegious to do. You know, the lamps, you care about ritual, but you're not caring about our relationship. And that just can't be anymore. Okay.
And,
all right.
You know, at the end of the day, Shalom Bayit does not mean one being subservient to another. That to me is not Shalom Bayit. It's only Shalom Bayit when you really do have an equal and caring and mutual relationship.
Absolutely.
However one is going to communicate that.
Absolutely. She's had it, but they both need to be able to say that in words and perhaps not these acts. Okay, let's move on to our next narrative. Rabbi Chia Bar Ashi used to prostrate himself in prayer and say, "May the merciful one save me from the evil impulse," his impulse for sexual intimacy. One day, his wife overheard him. She said, "Given that for several years he has abstained from me, why is he saying that prayer?" She just doesn't understand. If they haven't been together, intimate, she just assumed he wasn't interested. She said, again, "Given that for several years he abstained from me, why is he saying that prayer?" So, one day, he was studying in his garden. She adorned herself, passed by, and came before him. He said to her, "Who are you?" She said, "I am Libertina. I returned today." Libertina, in case anybody there doesn't know, was the famous prostitute of Babylonia. And he propositioned her. She said to him, instead of demanding money, "Bring me that pomegranate from the top of the tree." He jumped up and brought it to her. When he came home, his wife was lighting the stove. She went in before him. He went and sat inside the stove. She said, "What is this about?" He said, "Such and such happened." She said to him, "It was I." He said to her, "But in any case, my intention was to transgress." Now, first of all, why would he have been abstaining from sex with his wife? What are possible reasons? I'll get you started. Was it that he was not attracted to her anymore, and hence he abstained? Even though we know that in our Jewish tradition, that is not. Sex is part of a relationship. Anybody else?
Could it be because he wanted to concentrate on studying all the time?
Okay, Marilyn is close.
Bracha?
He wanted,
oh, sorry. Isn't it an obligation on the part of the
Yes,
husband?
that's what I just said, that he is meant to. That is part of marital life. But there have been people in our history that want and think that they can be on a higher level, almost holier than thou, even though we are told not to do that. Just as there are people who say, oh, I'll fast for 2 days. No, that doesn't make you better. That doesn't make you holier. But he had a sense that he wanted to rise above any of these impulses. And the wife apparently went along with it, which says something about her. But we are led to believe that she had such respect for him and assumed that that was the reason that she lived with it. Now, which meant that she, all these years, was suppressing her own desire for intimacy. But when she hears him praying and saying, please save me from evil impulse, she concludes that he does crave for a sexual relationship and assumes that it's just not with her. Because she's upset by what she considers now a betrayal, she seeks to test his fidelity. And that's why she dresses up as Libertina, goes in the backyard, looking to awaken his desire. And she succeeds. And how do we know? Tell me a word there, or in the second half, that tells us how excited he was when she wants him to pay. It's with the pomegranate. What does he do?
He jumped.
He jumped up and brought it to her. Now, anybody want to suggest why she had him jump up Because if you jump up, what has to happen after you jump up?
You come down.
You have to come down. Very good. What is she looking for him to do? She is trying now to bring, now that she realizes that he is human, and this has been a struggle for him all these years, and an unnecessary one, the imagery of the pomegranate is less important. We know that stands for fertility, but it's more that she wants to bring him down to earth. You've been up there trying to reach heaven. Now I want to bring you down to earth, sir. Now, if we read on, we see what is really the wrong that he does. Is it that he concedes and he propositions another woman? I don't think that's the real problem here. What is his real issue? Anyone? Again, they haven't talked either. Anybody? Okay, well, think about it. Now, interesting. What happens? I want to read those last few lines again. So she goes back inside, and he comes in, and he puts himself in the stove, in the oven. Why? What is he looking to do in that oven? When does somebody put their head in an oven?
Punish himself.
Punish himself, you're being kind. We're told, because of things later on, that he was actually looking to totally do away with himself. Now, why is that? Because he does feel shamed and guilt that he had relations with another woman, but it's also that he's still feeling shame to find out that he really isn't an angel and that he gave in to his urges. But what is interesting He went and sat inside it. She said, "What are you doing? What is this about?" What does he do now? He said, "Such and such happened." Well, people, he doesn't know that that was her outside. He doesn't know that she was Libertina. So he didn't have to tell her what happened. He did not have to tell her what happened. But he does. He does. It's the first time that he looks at her as someone, and as his wife, somebody that he should be open with. Now, when she says to him, "It was I," she's trying to tell him, on the one hand, you don't have to feel guilty because it was I, so you didn't really do something wrong. But he admits and he says, "But I was willing with somebody else." What is she saying when she says, "It was I"? Much more than just trying to make him feel better. What do those three words mean? It was I. She's screaming. Imagine her screaming. It was me. I was able to adorn myself and be beautiful and to attract you. Look what I've been through all these years. And look what you've put yourself through all these years. Now, what is this imagery of him trying to be an angel and then the wife dressing up as somebody else? What do they both need to do here? They both need, it's been suggested, to remove their masks.
Right.
He has lived as if he is acting like an angel. She put on the mask of being content. She put on the mask of dressing up in order to attract him. And she's shouting out to him as much as he's shouting out to her when he does tell her a tale that he did not have to tell. Anyone else before we close with one more comment?
They're finally
Anyone?
communicating with one another.
They
to
are
some
beginning
degree.
to communicate, and we hope both verbally and non-verbally to make up for lost time.
Who's this Beverly?
Okay, Beverly Birkin, you've met her, good friend. She used to come to your drugstore. So Admiel Kosman says, this story isn't about sex, it's about communication. God, and the husband has to realize this, God is to be found through sincerity, simplicity, and directness only by one who does not wear a costume, even for the sake of elevated ideals. No masks, no costumes, have to talk. Amen. Amen. So, anybody else before I escort my daughter to a wedding?
Oh,
Anybody? Okay. So next time we will be back to the usual time. Okay.
And just have a safe trip and enjoy. Take care.
And Mazel Tov.
Okay. Mazel Tov. Everybody have a good week. Stay well.
Bracha, it's nice to speak.
Mazel
Thank
tov.
you.
Good to be together.
Amen.